A drunk rich kid thought she was just a powerless cashier he could corner and humiliate. He tore her shirt, blocked her exit, and laughed as fear filled her eyes. His friend filmed it like a joke, because bullies always think they own the room. But he never saw the silent figure in the shadows, a Navy SEAL, on leave, with a German shepherd trained to take down grown men in the dark. And in the next few seconds, those boys were about to learn the painful difference between a predator and a protector. But what none of them knew, not even the girl he saved, was that this night wasn't just a coincidence. He wasn't supposed to be there, and the reason he walked into that store would change everything. Before we begin, tell us where you were watching from. And if this story moves your heart, please subscribe for more stories like this. A thin autumn drizzle softened the neon lights of Denver, brushing the glass of a corner convenience store where closing time was only minutes away. Lena Carter moved a damp cloth across the counter, her motions slow and deliberate, as if each swipe could erase the exhaustion weighing on her shoulders. At 26, she had already traded many pieces of her youth for responsibility: double shifts, skipped dinners, and the constant ache of worry. Her frame was slender, not fragile, but shaped by living cautiously. Her dark brown hair, loosely tied back, curled slightly from the humidity of the rain. Her green eyes, usually gentle, displayed a silent determination born from years of holding herself together. The store around her hummed with the lonely ambiance of closing hour, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, shelves perfectly aligned, microwaved food lingering faintly in the air. Outside the windows, headlights smeared across the wet asphalt, reminding her that the world was still moving, even when she wasn't. She glanced at the clock, 10:58 p.m. 2 more minutes, she thought. 2 minutes until she could return home and check on her mother's breathing, tuck the blanket around her, and try not to think about hospital bills. The bell over the door chimed. 2 young men entered, shaking droplets of rain from their jackets. They didn't carry the presence of customers. They carried the arrogance of people looking for entertainment. The taller one walked ahead. His name, though Lena didn't yet know, was Bradley Quinn, 22 years old, built lean and tall with sandy blonde hair cropped on the sides and tousled on top. He had the posture of someone who had never once been told no, and the careless swagger of someone who believed rules existed for others. His clothing, brand-name shoes, expensive jacket, didn't match the cheap beer on his breath. His eyes were pale blue, so washed out they seemed almost empty, holding the casual cruelty of a man raised on entitlement. Slightly behind him trailed Troy Mitchell, 21, broader-shouldered and heavier set, with unkempt dark hair and a hesitant posture that revealed more than he intended. Troy wasn't inherently cruel, only weak, his entire personality shaped by whoever stood beside him. He laughed when Bradley laughed, sneered when Bradley sneered, his identity stitched solely to his proximity to someone louder. Lena stepped forward, voice firm but polite. "Sorry, we're about to close." Bradley didn't acknowledge her. He drifted down an aisle and knocked a bag of chips off the shelf with the back of his hand. The crinkling plastic hit the floor louder than it should have in the near-silent store. Troy snorted and kicked the fallen bag farther, pretending it was a game. Lena's stomach tightened. She hated the way her voice always thinned out when she was afraid, but she forced herself to speak again. "We're closed. You need to leave." Bradley turned, leaning onto the counter too close. His breath smelled like stale beer. His eyes roamed across her name tag, Lena, and then traveled slowly to her face, assessing her in a way that made her skin crawl. She stood straighter, but her heartbeat thudded against her ribs like something trapped. Troy stepped behind her, blocking her exit to the employee hallway. The tiny store that moments ago felt like shelter now felt like a trap. Bradley reached out without warning, fast, confident, assuming his right to her space, and hooked his fingers into the neckline of her uniform shirt. He yanked. The fabric tore. The sound was small yet shattering, louder in her mind than in the air. Lena froze. Shame flushed through her, burning hot beneath her skin. Her hands flew to her shirt, trying desperately to hold together what was left. Troy laughed, a shaky, uncertain sound, but he didn't stop Bradley. Fear crawled into her chest like ice water. She looked toward the front windows. The rain blurred everything outside, turning the world into a watercolor smear. She wished she could melt into it. Her mother's voice surfaced in her memory, "When you're afraid, breathe first." But Lena's lungs refused to obey. Then she heard it, a faint scrape, boot sole on tile, coming from the far aisle. Bradley didn't notice, too focused on the smallness of the girl he was trying to dominate. Troy noticed first. He stopped laughing. His shoulders tensed. His eyes widened as someone stepped out from the end of the aisle. A man. Tall, broad-shouldered, silent. Ethan Miller moved into the fluorescent light like someone who had learned long ago how to control a room without speaking. Early 30s, 6'2", built from years of discipline rather than vanity. His hair was dark brown, cropped short. A shadow of stubble along his jaw accented the sharp angles of his face. Cheekbones defined, nose straight, jaw strong. His eyes, an intense gray, held the kind of depth found only in men who had seen violence and survived it. His clothing was simple, a dark jacket, boots still wet from rain, nothing flashy, yet everything about him radiated presence. Ethan had once been a Navy SEAL, a man accustomed to chaos, trained to run toward what others escaped. The military had carved something into him: precision, restraint, danger held on a leash. After service, he had learned to exist in silence, carrying his scars inward, memories of loss he never spoke of, weight invisible to everyone except the dog who stood beside him. Shadow stood perfectly still at Ethan's right leg, a large German shepherd, 3 years old, male, 55 pounds of muscle and instinct. His coat was a striking blend of sable and black, his posture alert but controlled. A faint scar traced along his right flank, a reminder of shrapnel from a mission overseas. His amber eyes locked onto Bradley with a predator's calm assessment. Shadow didn't growl. He didn't need to. His stance shifted, front weight, forward, head lowered ever so slightly, and every instinct in the room changed. Bradley finally sensed it. He turned and met Ethan's eyes. For the first time that night, his confidence faltered. Lena clutched her torn shirt, breathing in small, shaky breaths. Her knees trembled, but something inside her steadied at the sight of Ethan. Calm, solid, immovable, like the world finally stopped spinning. Ethan's gaze went from Bradley to Lena, taking in the ripped fabric, the fear in her eyes, the way she held herself together by sheer force of will. His jaw clenched, a muscle feathered along the side of his cheek. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Troy swallowed hard, stepping back from the exit he had been blocking. Shadow's eyes tracked him with surgical precision. Bradley's smirk flickered, not gone, just shaken. Ethan's presence changed the air itself. The room felt smaller, tighter, like the moment before a fuse meets flame. Lena exhaled for the first time in nearly a minute. She wasn't alone anymore. Ethan didn't need to raise his voice. His presence alone shifted the atmosphere, drawing every molecule of tension into a single point. Lena pressed her back tighter against the counter, one arm holding the torn fabric of her shirt closed. Bradley still had his hand extended where the cloth had ripped, but he wasn't smirking anymore. Troy stood frozen, his cocky posture collapsing as he stared at Shadow, whose steady amber gaze had transformed into lethal focus. Ethan took one step forward. It was enough for Bradley to instinctively retreat half a step, though he tried to mask it by rolling his shoulders and forcing a scoff. "Who the hell are you supposed to be?" Bradley demanded, voice straining to hold on to bravado. Ethan didn't answer. He rarely wasted words. Instead, he closed the distance with a controlled stride. His boots were quiet on the tile despite their weight, and the air shifted with him like gravity rearranged itself around the strongest force in the room. Ethan had the build of a man who didn't train to look powerful. He trained to survive. Muscles defined but not bulky, posture straight, shoulders wide, movements efficient. His years as a Navy SEAL had removed anything unnecessary. Unnecessary wasted motion, unnecessary hesitation, unnecessary fear. He stopped just close enough that Bradley had to tilt his chin to maintain eye contact. Bradley wavered. Troy shifted uneasily, his hand brushing a display rack of travel-sized toiletries. His voice cracked. "Brad, man, maybe we should—" Bradley shot him a glare. "Shut up! He's just some guy." Ethan finally spoke, his tone low and even. "Remove your hand from her shirt." Bradley tensed, chin jutting forward. "Or what?" Ethan didn't blink. "You won't like what comes next." Bradley squeezed the torn fabric again, as if the small act could reclaim control. But he had made a critical mistake. He touched a woman in distress in front of a man who had spent years protecting people under fire. Ethan's training shifted on, invisible gears aligning. He placed one hand on Bradley's wrist, not grabbing, just touching, and in a single fluid movement twisted, leveraging Bradley's momentum against him. Bradley's wrist bent at an angle it was not designed to bend, and the taller man collapsed to his knees with a sharp gasp. Ethan stepped forward, pivoting, trapping Bradley's arm along his forearm and pinning him against the counter without needing to use full strength. It was mechanical, practiced, clean. The sound of Bradley's breath catching filled the silence. Troy lunged forward with an angry snarl, but Shadow intercepted. The German shepherd moved like a silent bullet, no barking, no hesitation. In one stride, Shadow leaped and slammed Troy backward against a stack of bottled water cases. Despite the impact, Shadow's bite never connected. He simply stood inches away from Troy's throat, front paws planted firmly on Troy's chest. Weight, pinning him down without drawing blood. Shadow's lips curled just enough to show a row of sharp white teeth, but the dog waited, not attacking, holding. He knew the difference between neutralizing a threat and inflicting harm. Lena could only stare, breath trapped somewhere between panic and disbelief. Bradley tried to twist free but winced as Ethan applied subtle pressure to a joint that controlled all leverage in the arm. Ethan's voice remained level. "You're done," Bradley grunted through clenched teeth. "You're assaulting—" "Correction," Ethan said, voice steel. "I interrupted an assault." He released Bradley's wrist just long enough to turn him around and shove him face first onto the ground, forearm braced between his shoulder blades. Bradley swore, kicking uselessly, but the floor absorbed the impact. Troy whimpered beneath Shadow's weight. "Call off your dog. I'm not doing anything." Shadow didn't move. He was trained to remain until Ethan gave a command. Ethan kept both men immobilized, using only the amount of force needed to neutralize them. He did not punch, did not kick, did not shout. Violence was unnecessary when precision existed. Lena's breath steadied as adrenaline left her shaking. Her mind sputtered with disbelief. 2 minutes ago she had been alone, terrified, gripping her torn shirt. Now she stood behind the counter watching two aggressors completely subdued by one man and his dog, with a level of control that didn't feel theatrical. It felt real, practiced, earned. A distant wail of police sirens echoed faintly from the street. Troy's eyes darted toward the sound, then back to Bradley, silently pleading for instruction. Bradley tried to force a smirk through the humiliation. "You're gonna get arrested for this," he spat. Ethan didn't rise to the bait. He simply pressed Bradley's shoulder a fraction of an inch further until the boy's face tightened in pain. "No," Ethan said, expression unchanging. "What I did was stop you." Lena finally found her voice. "Thank you." She didn't know what else to say. Gratitude felt too small for what had almost happened, and what had been prevented. Ethan didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on the threats. "Are you hurt?" His tone wasn't soft or tender. It was direct, focused, assessing. The tone of someone who needed to know the condition of a civilian in a compromised environment. Lena shook her head, not trusting her voice. Her hands clutched the torn fabric of her shirt like a lifeline. She didn't realize she was crying until she tasted salt on her lips. The sirens grew louder, closer. Bradley seized the sound like a lifeline. "They'll believe me," he hissed. "My dad knows every cop." Ethan's eyes flicked to Lena. "Stay behind me when they come in." She nodded. Shadow finally stepped back from Troy, positioning himself between Ethan and the second aggressor, like a wall of muscle and instinct. For a moment, the store felt suspended. Sirens outside, two aggressors pinned, Lena trembling but safe, and Ethan standing exactly where fate had placed him, where he needed to be. He didn't come here to be a hero. He came to buy a bottle of water and dog treats for Shadow. But life has a way of putting certain people in the right place at the exact moment someone else needs saving. And Ethan Miller had never once walked away from a battle that mattered. Red and blue lights streaked across the rain-dampened windows, flashing through the aisles like restless lightning. Lena braced her torn shirt against her chest, heart pounding with the fragile belief that rescue had arrived. Ethan kept Bradley and Troy pinned until the door jolted open. Two uniformed officers stepped inside, rain sliding off their jackets in a tired sheen. The first officer, Officer Mark Ellison, entered with crisp precision. Mid-40s, trim build, clean-shaven face with deep lines around his mouth from years of absorbing complaints instead of speaking his own truth. His brown hair, flecked lightly with gray, was neatly combed, and his eyes, dark and alert, scanned the situation with the controlled focus of someone who believed rules mattered. He carried himself like a man who once dreamed of changing the world, but learned to compromise in order to survive within the system. His partner trailed behind him, Officer Dean Hargrove, early 30s, muscular, brusque, hair clipped to military shortness, jaw shadowed by stubble, as if shaving would require more effort than he cared to exert. His temperament showed in his posture, chin raised slightly, shoulders decorated with arrogance. He was the kind of man who enjoyed authority, not responsibility. Hargrove spotted Bradley on the floor and reacted with instant aggression. "Step away from him," he barked, already reaching for his taser. Ethan remained perfectly still, one hand braced between Bradley's shoulder blades, controlling pressure without overuse of force. Shadow stood poised beside him, as if fused to his body, ears forward, muscles primed, but waiting for the smallest signal from Ethan. In a voice calm enough to unsettle anyone looking for fire, Ethan replied, "These two attacked her. I intervened." Hargrove didn't even look toward Lena. He moved closer, authority dripping with assumption. "Let him go, or you will be detained." Lena rushed around the counter, still clutching her torn shirt, her voice shaky but desperate. "No, he protected me. They grabbed me. They tore my shirt. He stopped them." Ellison finally noticed her, the ripped fabric, the terror in her posture. His eyes tightened with concern, but before he could speak, Bradley snapped his chance. He jerked free the moment Ethan released pressure, rolling onto his back and clutching his wrist dramatically. "He attacked us!" Bradley gasped, forcing tears into his voice. "For no reason." Lena stared in disbelief. "That's a lie. You grabbed me." Hargrove lifted his chin toward Bradley. "You're Bradley Quinn, right?" Bradley nodded, desperate confidence blooming when he realized he was recognized. Troy, still trembling from Shadow's weight earlier, seized the moment and adopted the same false narrative. "We came in to buy something, then he just jumped us. The dog attacked me." It was a performance with the desperation of cowards, but it played directly into the weakness of systems built around hierarchy and reputation. Ellison glanced at Troy, then Bradley, then back at Ethan. Something in his eyes hinted that he knew the boys were lying. But before he could speak, a third figure entered from the threshold, rain dripping from a long black coat. He walked with an aura so familiar, so effortlessly dominant, that the room itself shifted. Chief Raymond Quinn, late 50s, tall and thick-shouldered, his salt and pepper hair cut precisely, uniform immaculate. His presence radiated entitlement, the kind that didn't need to be loud to be felt. His badge glinted sharply under the harsh store lights, and the deep line between his brows carved the expression of a man who was used to being obeyed. Raymond's eyes landed on Bradley. "Son, are you hurt?" That final word, son, hit Lena like a slap. Bradley straightened, pretending to wince. "Dad, this guy attacked us out of nowhere." Raymond shifted his gaze to Ethan, cold, dismissive, appraising him as if Ethan were an unruly animal blocking the path. "Release him," Raymond ordered the officers, and the command wasn't for Ethan. It was for the room, as though Ethan was already guilty. Ethan slowly stood, posture straight, expression unreadable. Shadow moved with him, silent and controlled, his amber eyes locked on Bradley with watchful distrust. Raymond moved toward Lena. For a fleeting second, she thought he might care. His expression softened only enough to simulate concern. "Ma'am," he said, "I apologize for the disturbance. If this man," he motioned toward Ethan, "used excessive force, we'll document it. I know this is overwhelming." Lena stared at him with disbelief. "You're apologizing for him? He saved me." Raymond offered a sympathetic frown that disintegrated into indifference the moment she finished speaking. He turned to Hargrove. "Detain the man for assault pending investigation." Ellison hesitated. "Chief, the girl's shirt is torn. Her statement—" "I said detain him," Raymond repeated, voice void of doubt, tone used to eliminating disagreement. Hargrove grabbed Ethan's arm, twisting it unnecessarily as if needing to prove dominance. Shadow surged forward, hackles flaring, a growl rumbling deep in his chest. Ethan lifted a hand, quiet control snapping the dog into stillness. "Easy, Shadow." In that moment, what terrified Lena wasn't the aggression of the officers, it was the numb acceptance on Ethan's face. Like someone who had lived through worse injustice and learned that fighting the system often changed nothing. Lena stepped forward, voice shaking. "You can't do this. He didn't do anything wrong." Raymond didn't even look at her. "Without camera footage, we go with the statements that align, 2 against 1. Lena shook her head. "But I was here, my statement." Raymond fixed his gaze on her, polite but chilling. "Miss, I understand you're emotional, but we cannot act on emotion." Emotion? Is fear emotion? Is truth emotion? Lena felt something crack inside her. She watched as Ethan was handcuffed, not because he was guilty, but because someone powerful decided he should be. Through it all, Ethan remained silent. He didn't resist. He didn't protest. His jaw was tight, his eyes unreadable, his body still. The soldiers taught him to endure pain, not to argue with it. As Hargrove guided him toward the exit, Shadow followed closely, refusing to leave his side. Rain splattered onto Ethan's face when they stepped outside, sirens painting his silhouette blue and red. Lena stood frozen inside the store, gripping her torn shirt, watching helplessly as the man who saved her was taken away. She felt the inverted cruelty of the moment. The aggressors walked free, the protector went to jail, and all she could do was whisper, "I'm sorry." The holding room smelled faintly of bleach and metal, a sterile coldness that clung to the walls like unspoken judgment. Ethan sat on a steel bench, hands cuffed in front of him, posture upright, not because he was comfortable, but because discipline was a muscle memory he couldn't turn off. Shadow lay on the floor at his feet, head resting on Ethan's boot, amber eyes alert yet calm. The dog's chest rose and fell slowly, a picture of controlled vigilance. Even here, Shadow considered himself on duty. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, blinking occasionally as if unsure whether to stay awake. Ethan's face remained impassive, but a storm churned quietly behind his gray eyes. Not fear, not anger, just the old, familiar weight of injustice pressing into the scar tissue of his past. He had seen systems fail good people before. He had buried brothers because people in power made decisions without truth. He knew how to endure silence. On the other side of the city, the convenience store was no longer just a store. It was becoming a spark. Near the snack aisle, hidden by a half-stocked rack of canned soup, a college student named Lucas Rivera had stayed crouched during the entire confrontation. Lucas, 19, slim build, caramel-toned skin, curly dark hair that perpetually fell into his wide, expressive eyes, wasn't a fighter. He was a film major, with a cheap camera always hanging around his neck and his phone always halfway charged from overuse. He lived more in documentaries than in reality, always searching for moments that felt like truth. And what he had recorded tonight was truth in its rawest form. He replayed the footage on the tiny phone screen, Ethan stepping forward, Shadow pinning Troy, Lena trying to shield herself with trembling hands. His heart hammered, rage and adrenaline tangled inside him. Lucas had always believed that the real world rarely resembled hero stories. Most people looked away, most people did nothing. But tonight, he saw someone stand up, someone who didn't ask permission to do the right thing. Lucas uploaded the full, unedited video to his vlog channel. He typed only one caption. "This man saved a girl. Police arrested the wrong person." Then he pressed post. Within minutes, the video began to spread. It moved from Lucas's channel to forums, to TikTok, to Twitter. Comments poured in. "Hero arrested? Cops protecting the chief's chin. Disgusting." A true wildfire never begins as a fire. It begins as dry grass that's been ignored too long. And tonight, the city was bone dry. Back at the station, Lena rushed through the glass doors, her torn shirt held together by a borrowed sweatshirt from a woman leaving a late shift. That woman, Sarah Donnelly, mid-30s, tall and slender with cropped blonde hair and freckles across pale cheeks, was a social worker who had stopped when she heard Lena crying in the parking lot. Sarah had a softness born from years of listening to impossible stories and an inner steel from surviving her own. She guided Lena past the front desk with purposeful confidence, one hand lightly on Lena's back, protective without crowding her. Sarah wasn't part of the story before tonight, but something inside her, the instinct to shield those who were alone, pulled her into the storm. At the front counter sat Dispatch Officer Valerie Cho, late 20s, petite, sharp bob of glossy black hair, framing a face that seemed too gentle for a job that required stone walls. But Valerie was nothing like the system she worked inside. She noticed details. She noticed pain. Her almond-shaped eyes flicked to Lena's torn shirt, then to Sarah's protective stance, then to the tremor in Lena's voice when she asked where Ethan was. Valerie lowered her voice, leaning in so only they heard. "They shouldn't have arrested him." Lena swallowed hard. "Then why did they?" Valerie hesitated, then answered with a whisper, shaped like resignation. "Because the boy he put on the floor has a father with a badge." Across the station, Chief Raymond Quinn paced his office, barking into the phone, veins visible along his neck. I don't care what she claims. My son was assaulted. Behind his words was desperation masquerading as authority. He knew what the world would see if the narrative shifted. A privileged son, protected from his actions. A father who used power to protect entitlement. The press would devour him. Power protects itself before it protects truth. Meanwhile, in the holding area, a door clicked open. Officer Ellison stepped inside. The lines of duty carved into his face now bore something heavier: conflict. He had spent his career balancing the law against the weight of orders, but tonight, something in him refused to bend. He silently unlocked the handcuffs without speaking. Ethan rubbed his wrists, red from steel, though he showed no sign of discomfort. "You're releasing me?" Ethan asked, voice steady. Something happened. Ellison unlocked the second cuff and stepped back. The world saw what happened. In the lobby, every phone began chiming at once. Valerie's monitor filled with notifications. Social media alerts stacked in rapid bursts. Viral, trending, national share velocity increasing. Valerie turned the screen toward Ellison. The video now had over 1.2 million views. Under it, thousands of comments demanded Ethan's release and accountability for the real offenders. Headlines began to surface. Navy SEAL arrested after protecting woman from assault. Cops cover for chief's son? Ellison let out a breath that he didn't realize he'd been holding. Justice wasn't quiet tonight. It had a megaphone. Raymond Quinn stormed out of his office, red-faced. "Release him! Are you insane? That video could be edited?" The lobby doors burst open. Reporters shoved microphones forward. Flashbulbs exploded. At the center of the swarm stood Lucas Rivera, camera strap. Around his neck, chest rising and falling with courage, he didn't know he had until this moment. "It wasn't edited," Lucas said, voice steady. "And I posted it from multiple angles, because I filmed everything." Raymond froze, his son's lies shattered in a single sentence. Ellison turned toward Ethan. "You're free to go." Ethan didn't celebrate. He didn't smile. He simply placed one hand on Shadow's head and walked out through the storm of reporters. Lena met him outside. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Tears streaked down her face as she threw her arms around him, the embrace impulsive and raw. Shadow pressed his body against Ethan's leg, leaning into the contact like he knew the world had been righted. For the first time that night, Ethan allowed himself a slow breath, not of relief, but recognition. Some battles are fought with weapons. Other battles are won because someone dared to tell the truth. Morning light filtered through thin clouds as Denver slowly exhaled the chaos of the night before. The storm had passed, leaving the streets washed clean and shining. Autumn leaves, soaked and heavy, clung to the pavement like fragments of a story the city hadn't yet finished telling. The convenience store now sat behind yellow caution tape, not because a crime scene demanded it, but because reporters had swarmed its entrance until the owner finally begged the police to block it off. Lena stood just outside the tape. She wore a fresh uniform shirt, sleeves slightly too long, borrowed from the back stockroom, while her own torn one was kept as evidence. The bruising around her collarbone had begun to bloom in soft shades of violet. Physically, the marks were small. Emotionally, the imprint of fear had taken up residence in the quiet parts of her mind. Yet her eyes, green like spring leaves beneath morning frost, held something new: resolve. A day ago, she felt invisible. Today, half the city demanded justice on her behalf. But for Lena, the moment of change wasn't when millions of strangers clicked share. It was when one man stood up. Inside the store, overhaul had begun. The owner, George Howell, knelt on a ladder, installing high-resolution security cameras. George was in his late 50s, compact and round, with thinning gray hair combed carefully over a shiny scalp. His hands trembled slightly from years of stress and arthritic joints, but he worked with determination. He wasn't a brave man, and he knew it. He had always chosen silence to avoid confrontation, but after witnessing how silence nearly cost Lena her safety, he was done being quiet. Lena helped him unwrap wiring, her hands steady despite the lingering emotional tremor inside her. George shifted, clearing his throat, voice low and awkward. "You shouldn't have gone through that alone." Lena looked up at him. I wasn't alone, and she meant it, not because of the cameras, not because of social media, but because Ethan existed. Outside, across the parking lot, Ethan and Shadow stood beside an aging black pickup truck. Ethan leaned against the side, one boot crossed loosely over the other, his arms folded across his chest. He looked different in daylight, less like a thread of contained power, and more like the outline of a man who had spent years carrying too much without ever setting anything down. His shirt was plain, dark charcoal, sleeves pushed just enough to reveal the lines of forearm muscle and faded scars. Shadow sat beside him, ears pricked, tongue hanging from a slightly open mouth, as he observed everything around them. In sunlight, his coat, black and sable, caught warm highlights, revealing the healthy sheen of a dog well cared for. A girl no older than 12 approached cautiously from the sidewalk. She had chestnut hair and 2 braids and wore a bright yellow raincoat. In her hands was a folded poster with Ethan's face, captured from a screenshot of the viral video, and the words, "Thank you, hero," in thick purple marker. Lena watched from the store entrance as the girl handed the poster to Ethan. Her voice trembled with shy admiration. "My mom said not everyone would help a stranger." Ethan crouched slightly, accepting the poster without hesitation. "Thank you," he said quietly. The girl beamed and hurried away. Shadow wagged his tail, nudging Ethan's knee with his nose as if asking if treats were involved. For a brief second, a smile, small, unguarded, real, touched Ethan's mouth. Lena felt warmth spread through her chest. She crossed the parking lot toward him. "You didn't have to stay," she said. Ethan looked at her. His eyes, those storm gray eyes, held no arrogance, only steadiness. "I wanted to make sure you were okay." "I am," she said, "because of you, because of Shadow." Shadow leaned into Ethan's leg, tail thumping the ground at the sound of his name. Lena knelt and scratched behind his ear. "You saved me too, Shadow." Shadow nudged his head into her palm, pleased with the attention. Ethan observed the moment with a quiet softness that came only when someone watched something fragile and knew not to disturb it. Across the lot, a news notification pinged on a phone someone held nearby. Bradley Quinn and Troy Mitchell charged with assault and attempted coercion. Chief Quinn placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Justice rarely moved that swiftly, but public scrutiny had turned the city into a courtroom. And every share, every comment, every voice pushed truth forward until power had no choice but to listen. Inside the store, George flipped to the final switch. The new security system blinked to life, bright red LED lights that glowed like guardians. Lena rejoined him, handing tools back to the box. She looked around the place where fear had once closed around her throat like a fist. Now it felt lighter, safer. Strong walls mattered, but knowing someone would stand between her and danger, that mattered more. When Ethan and Shadow stepped inside, George straightened. He walked toward Ethan, shoulders tense with unspoken apology. "I should have been braver," George said, voice rough. "I'm sorry you had to take the fall." Ethan shook his head. "You protected Lena by calling the police. That matters." George's eyes glossed slightly, embarrassment burning through him. "Well, still, thank you." He patted Ethan's arm once, turned away quickly, as though eye contact might make him emotional. Lena looked at Ethan. "What happens now?" Ethan reached down, brushing Shadow's fur. "Shadow and we keep moving, not good at staying in one place too long." His voice was steady, but Lena sensed something beneath it. Past pain, a pattern of leaving before anything could root deep enough to make losing hurt. She stepped closer. "You don't always have to leave." Ethan held her gaze, and for the first time, since the night began, something shifted. Not dramatic, not sudden, but important. He let her see the truth behind his composed exterior, a man who had spent years saving others while believing he didn't deserve to stay. Shadow broke the heaviness by nudging Ethan's hand toward Lena like a clumsy matchmaker. Lena laughed, and Ethan shook his head but didn't pull away. "If you ever need anything," she said softly, "coffee, help tightening a screw, protection from stray raccoons, whatever, you can come back." Ethan's lips curved slightly. "We'll keep that in mind." No promises, but not a goodbye either. Ethan rested his palm briefly on Lena's shoulder, a grounding, steady touch. Then he whistled once. Shadow rose, tail up, ready to follow wherever Ethan went. As they walked out the door, the bell chimed gently behind them. Ethan glanced back one last time. Lena stood framed in the warm glow of the store lights, safe. For the first time in a long while, Ethan didn't feel like a ghost passing through. He felt seen. Shadow trotted beside him as they crossed the parking lot to the truck. No applause, no medal, just 2 figures disappearing into the morning light. Quiet, steady, unremarkable to anyone who didn't know better. But Lena knew, heroes don't always stay. Sometimes they leave so they can be there for the next person who needs them. And sometimes, the gentlest acts, standing up, telling the truth, protecting someone who can't protect themselves, rewrite the ending of a story that began with fear. Sometimes the greatest miracles don't arrive with angels, trumpets, or lightning from the sky. They arrive through ordinary people who choose to do the right thing when no one is watching. In a world that often feels loud with cruelty and indifference, kindness can feel small, but small things placed in the hands of God become powerful. Ethan didn't appear with a cape or a spotlight. He showed up the way miracles often do, quietly, unexpectedly, through courage and compassion. Maybe that's how God works, through you, through me, through every person who decides that someone else's safety matters more than their own comfort. As you go back to your everyday life, your job, your family, your routine, remember this: you never know when God might call you to be someone's unexpected miracle. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and comment your thoughts below. Subscribe to the channel so these stories can reach more people who need to believe that goodness still exists. May God bless everyone watching, protect you on your journey, and guide you to be a light in someone else's darkness.